few minutes early. I apologize. The reason why we are early is because I was watching Recovery Addict stream and he knows something that he's not telling. And so now I'm worried. I'm on pins and needles. I've got to know what is about to happen. He knows something that I don't and he's not saying. So I'm anxious. So I had to start early. Because they are here and ready to go. So we are doing this now. Why are you buffering? No, no, no. No buffering allowed. Stop it.
Cold-blooded killer.
Hang on. I didn't tell you to do that. I had you where I wanted you to start from. I'm in a hurry and you're going to be stupid, computer. That's what I get for trying to be in a hurry.
Myself and the defense have an opportunity to speak to you directly. It's called our closing statement, our closing
Good. I think.
evidence that you're going to hear in this case. You've already heard it. It's either sitting right here or through testimony that you've already heard. And so my goal is just talk a little bit about this case with you and sort of explain the state's perspective and how we have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Zach Hughes did in fact commit the crimes he's admitted. To speak to you directly. It's called our closing statement, our closing arguments. All the evidence that you're going to hear in this case, you've already heard it. It's either sitting. My goal here is to just talk a little bit about this case with you and sort of explain the state's perspective and how we have proven beyond a reasonable doubt that Zach Hughes did in fact commit the crime he's alleged.
Can you hear me? It told me it lost sound, and when it says that, it says to reshare your screen, and that's what I did. And usually that works. Do you want me to go back to the beginning? I'll start over.
Have an opportunity to speak to you directly. It's called our closing statement, our closing arguments. All the evidence that
Can you hear
you've
it
already
now?
heard.
I mean, before I paused it.
It's either sitting right here or it's through testimony that you already heard. And so my goal here is to just talk a little bit about this case with you and sort of explain the state, a reasonable doubt that Zach Hughes did the crimes that he's alleged to have done. Go through those crimes a little bit, talk a little bit about that, and then I'm going to go through the evidence and explain my perspective on those things. I will give you a bit of a caveat that this is a little bit of a unique case in that you rarely have the defendant testifying and admitting to the entire crime during the trial. So in that respect, my closing argument may be a little different or maybe a little abnormal than our normal way we do things, but I'm going to do my best. I first want to thank you for your service. It's been a long 2 weeks. Y'all have been extremely attentive. You've paid attention. You've listened to the judge. And to be frankly, I couldn't ask for a better jury, and I appreciate your service. On behalf of my co-counsel, Mr. Jake Hoferth, Investigator Jared Sparkman, and Master Deputy Blake Wolf, we thank you for your service. Now, I told you in my opening statements that once you see and hear all the testimony in this trial, and I did not know that the defendant was going to testify, you're going to find that Zach Hughes, I don't know if you remember what I said, is a cold-blooded. And I submit that the state, and along with the testimony of Zach Hughes, we did in fact prove all of that beyond a reasonable doubt. Zach Hughes is a cold-blooded killer. Zach Hughes is an admitted cold-blooded killer. And keep in mind, he solved John Mello's problems. So the judge is going to instruct you on the law, and just as we just abide by, we're going to abide by his rulings, you must abide by his instructions. Remember, I told you he's the referee, calls balls and strikes, and he also tells us what the rules are, what the law is. Y'all took an oath way long ago that you can probably remember back in last week on Monday, a week ago, and you said you would take an oath, you would adhere to his instructions, you would do your duty as jurors, and I have no doubt in my mind that you will absolutely do that. Now, before Zach Hughes admitted to the murder of Christina Parcel, state called approximately 32 witnesses. We submitted close to 200 exhibits. If you put all this on a hard drive, it's a little over 4 terabytes of information. And all of that taken together, it's a lot of evidence to digest. Now, with the admission of Zach Hughes to a lot of the state's case, the questions you were presented with at the beginning of the case really are answered. Regardless of what he may believe in his head, his actions are what matter in this courtroom. Actions speak louder than words. And boy, do we have a lot of cold, calculated, horrific actions in this case. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you must find the facts based on the evidence in this trial and solely based on the evidence presented at this trial inside this courtroom. And it's undisputed that Zach Hughes planned.
He should be using his legal name anyway. That sounds bad.
He lay and waited. He broke into Christina Parcel's home with a .22 and a knife, some roses. She had just returned home from an interview, from her last interview with Vet Tech. Zach Hughes, a person she had never met. She had never met him. Beat her with a gun, brutally stabbed her 35 times, severing her jugular vein and her carotid artery. Now, as we go through the evidence and we look at some of the different things, I'm going to ask you to keep in mind of the charges that you're actually looking at. So the first charge I'm explaining is the harassment charge. And there's two harassment. There's harassment and there's conspiracy to commit harassment. The only difference is the conspiracy requires two or more people joining and to commit the harassment. So harassment is just a pattern of intentional, substantial, and unreasonable intrusion into the private life of a targeted person that serves no legitimate purpose and cause that person and would cause a reasonable person in his position to suffer mental or emotional distress. That's related to all those photos and those documents that you saw mailed out. I think there's 7 envelopes full of photos and other documents. You heard testimony about what was in those. Some of them are in evidence. Some were just described because those were pictures of Christina Parcel without any clothes on. So we didn't introduce those so as not to embarrass her or her family. Burglary first. A person is guilty of burglary first if he enters a dwelling without consent and with the intent to commit a crime. And I remind you, the judge is going to tell you the law is, what it is. I'm just trying to give you an outline so you can keep that in mind as we're going through this evidence. And they enter without consent and are armed with a deadly weapon or cause physical injury. Well, those things all already appeared in this case. Zach Hughes went in under a ruse of roses, according to his own testimony, but he went in directly with the intent to commit harm, and he had weapons on him. And then you've got murder. You also have possession of the weapon during the commission of a violent crime. That is, if you used a weapon and you murder somebody, that is the possession of the weapon during that commission of a violent crime. But you have murder, which is the killing of any person with malice aforethought. Malice aforethought. And you're going to hear those words a lot in the judge's instructions. But malice is ill will towards another person, the intentional doing of a wrong act with the intent to inflict injury. And I think I said early on, ladies and gentlemen, it was a depraved heart, an angry heart, with the intent to harm somebody. And there's also express malice, meaning it's expressed. It's right there in front of you. And it's shown when there are words of hatred or when someone prepares to do the act. They prepare to go in there. It's called premeditation, is what you'll hear the judge charge you. Premeditation is preparing to go and harm somebody, like lying in wait, like buying weapons beforehand, by concealing your identity going in there. Those kinds of things are premeditation, things that you do in preparation of the violent act. And if you find those things, and you find the state proved those beyond a reasonable doubt, then you can find the defendant guilty. So before we get in, let's start with a little background now. You know the players, you know everybody involved in here, you know the victim. You've heard a lot about the victim, Christina Parcel. You've heard a lot about John Mello. You've heard a lot about Zach Hughes. And you've heard a lot about Christina Parcel and John Mello's daughter. So the background, and we're talking the time frame from 2020, October 2020-ish, to October 13th, 2021. So we're roughly a time span of 1 year. And what happens throughout that year that leads up to the murder of Christina Parcel? Zach Hughes never talked to Christina Parcel. He didn't know Christina Parcel. He never met Christina Parcel. And everything he knew about Christina Parcel, even according to his own testimony, was told to him by John Mello or shown to him in certain evidence. John Mello was in a nasty custody battle with Christina Parcel. We all know that. He was on his fourth round of custody disputes with Christina Parcel. Keep in mind, and according to the Guardian ad hoc, the prior three were just as nasty.
Micah, do you know this case? This woman's ex was in a custody battle, and he basically, I believe, manipulated this very nice young man who had a good career and his whole life in front of him. He was a Juilliard trained pianist, and he manipulated this young guy into killing his ex because he wanted custody of his kid. Now, however, by this happening, it brought to light that this woman and her fiance were calling it baby corn because YouTube does not like the real words. Corn rhymes with you know what, and baby, children. So they were taking those pictures and they were found on 9 different devices. There were, let me get back to my notes. $2,267 pictures on one, 4,000 pictures and 48 videos on another one, over 2,000 on another, and 137 videos, 1,500 pictures and 81 videos, 3,700 pictures and 47 videos, and on and on and on. Yeah. And she was a vet tech, so she fostered sick animals. There were animals in the pictures and videos, and this little girl's friend, she roped in one of her friends. So because of this, all of this has come to light now, which is good. So her fiance is now in jail. And her ex had only been, he was out on bond for conspiracy to harass. But after the defendant testified yesterday that he had been offered money to do this, they arrested him yesterday and did not give him bond. So now he is in jail for conspiracy to commit murder. So, and the judge does not want the jury to know about the baby corn. So they know nothing about that. Well, they did know nothing about that. Zach Hughes, the defendant, tried to tell them yesterday from the stand. He said that she was being essayed by her mother and the state is lying to you about it. And he was out on bond. He went home and then the police arrested him at his house yesterday. And now he is in jail for 6 months, whether or not he gets acquitted of this crime. So that's a quick recap. And this is closing arguments.
But they had always been settled where John Mello would have significant custody of their daughter. But in April of 2021, that changed. The tide changed for John Mello because he took Aida out of the country in violation of that order, according to the Italian courts. And he took her to Italy.
Oh, thank you.
And Christina Parcel didn't even know about that until she saw a social media post where she realizes my daughter's out of the country, I can't see or talk to her, and she's with her father. Thus the continuation of this nasty child custody dispute. And then from October to April, Aida was living in Italy with little or no contact with Christina. So what did Christina do? She did what any mother would do, is she tried to get the return of her daughter. So she went through this process, and it was explained by Christina's sister, Tina Parcel, as well as the guardian ad litem, Vanessa Cormelo. She filed under what's called the Hague Convention, and she asked to have her daughter returned to her. She actually flew to Italy twice to have these hearings in Italy. And she was successful. She won that particular battle in this myriad of battles of child custody that have been going on between these two individuals. And so in April of 2021, that really set off John Mello. He was unhappy. And we know the things, and we're going to talk about the things that he did starting that day, through the WhatsApps, through the harassment letters, everything else, to solve that custody dispute problem. And that's where this case really, really began. That is when things turned not in favor of Christina Parcel. She lost her life as a result. So what is the relationship between Zach Hughes and John Mello? All right, so where did they all come into this mass of characters? Well, according to Zach, he met John on the streets of Greenville about August of 2020, and he was with Aida, and Zach played a very likable classical music piece that John Mello and Aida liked. And that's how they met. So they met that one time. That was one of the few times that Zach Hughes actually met Aida Mello. And he talked about, they went on about 4 or 5, maybe 6 occasions where they were hanging out. They got some tacos one night. They saw a museum. But Aida Mello didn't know Zach Hughes. She didn't know who he was. She's a 9-year-old little girl who heard him play a piano piece, who's a friend of her dad's. And that's all the time they ever spent together. That's it. In August until October, John Mello left for Italy. And with him went Aida. So Zach Hughes never spent any more time with Aida, what little time he did during that small time, never again. Now, he may have seen her on a FaceTime while he's talking to her dad. He may have seen her or seen videos of that, which he testified to. But Zach acted on this stand as if he could see into her soul. He could see into her eyes. He knew how she was feeling. He could tell that she gained weight and why she gained weight at a certain particular time in her life, in her adolescent life. He is drawing those conclusions on a little bit of information and nothing but whatever John Mello is feeding him. So, what's their first thing? Aida's back with her mother. She, in May, begins living at Cambridge with her aunt, Tina Parcel, and that's where they're living there. John Mello's in Italy, and Zach Hughes and John Mello decide, well, you know what we're going to do? Let's embarrass Christina Parcel. Let's make her life look bad. Let's make her look like a prostitute. That'll help me get custody of her. That'll help me with the guardian ad litem. And so John Mello, according to Bevel, Detective Bevel, who testified, had photos, and according to the evidence right here, he had photos of Christina Parcel. And those photos were taken when she was much younger. And those photos are taken between two consensual adults engaging in what acts that two consensual adults can do. And that's it. And then he took those photos and he used them as a weapon. And he tried to make her look like a prostitute. Because that's what John Mello continually told Zach Hughes, according to his own testimony, Alex Field's affidavit. Let's make her look like a prostitute and let's send them around to a neighborhood. Well, they sent them to a neighborhood where Brad Post lived. They didn't even send them to Cambridge. And we know this because in these WhatsApps, they talk about it specifically. They talk about May I present to you my daughter's mother, Christina Warren, Caroline Warren, escort. And we know there's a bunch of attachments that we can't see because Zach Hughes deleted these on October 13th. And we retrieved them from WhatsApp. They're deleted. So you have to see us investigate.
They sent packages of nude photographs of the little girl's mom, and it looks like they're on a website, an escort service website, and the prosecution is saying that they were cut and pasted to make it look like it came from the website. The defense is saying it came from an actual website. Whenever the police tried to go to the actual website, it didn't exist, but it redirected them to a real website. So there's no proof as to whether or not that website itself ever existed. So that's what they're talking about right now. And on the envelopes, it had her fiance's return address on them as if he were sending them around to people, which is another really weird. That was involved with the baby corn. And John Mello is the little girl's dad.
And then they sent them that way, and then Zach Hughes receives them. He gets them, and he sees an email that was sent to him. It was very, and he prepares all these packages to Brad Post, to Mr. Bradley Post. These are all his P.O. box. Brad Post, cigar bar. Where Brad Post hangs out. Misspells Mr. Post one time in the WhatsApps, misspells it here, P-O-A-S-T, is why we know it, but Zach Hughes admitted it. This email here purports to come from Mullen Investigations, and it's cut out. And you've got this photo, same ones that are in here. But there's no URL.
This prosecutor is not capable of that, trust me. he's barely capable of remembering what questions he wants to ask.
And this is the escort site. And it says Caroline Warren. She became a member, Caroline Warren, in 2009. Well, this is 2021. And apparently this one investigation now needs these attached a square of an escort site of Caroline Warren. Well, I don't know who that is. John Mello. Vanessa Carmelo testified to it. She received emails from Mullen Investigations. She received lots of emails from people purporting to be John Mello. So Zach Hughes went to the trouble of preparing all these envelopes, manipulating all the items, the photos, the escort, and putting it together. And he wanted to make sure we knew it was her. And so we would add a cover letter. You can see the cover letter that he would do. He had to add a cover letter to make sure you knew exactly who that was, that it was Christina Parcel that was engaging in prostitution. And he sent them out to shame her, to make fun of her. There's WhatsApps in there saying, we're going to ruin her day. And Zach Hughes did it the same way he committed this murder. He used his bike, he avoided cameras, tried to find a location, and he didn't know that we could track his phone. And so we know he was in Greenville when he mailed those in June and July, and he was in Tennessee when the other two were mailed. So we know he did all that. But the big point of the harassment is not that That's bad to do somebody. It's really what Tina Parcel referred to as revenge porn. South Carolina does not have a statute for revenge porn. We have harassment. And that's exactly what that is. But he's really doing it, one, to make her look bad, to make her look like a prostitute. But he's also trying to do it to gain a strategic advantage in this custody battle. And it doesn't work. He even sends one to the guardian ad litem. What does the guardian ad litem do? She investigates.
And he kept saying, "Oh, wait a minute. Let me back up. I forgot to ask you something." And he didn't just do it once. He did it like 3 or 4 times.
Everything. But Brad Post put a lot of work in. I mean, Zach Hughes put a lot of work into that. It's a lot of work finding all those envelopes. To somebody he doesn't even know, he's never met, never talked to. Now, John Mello, I would say he's pretty much a liar. He dated Christina back in 05 and 06 and had their daughter in 2012. And of course, this custody battle. And if you want to look about the character and who John Mello is, I refer you back to Vanessa Cormelow's testimony. She testified that John Mello would do horrific things in relation to this custody battle. To her, to a lawyer who's representing a little girl as a guardian ad litem who's practicing law for 26 years, he would accuse her of horrific things, according to her. He would accuse her of trafficking children in Spartanburg. He would post things on social media ridiculing her. And that's how John Mello operated. That's how he operated. He used deceit by using fake emails. He used threats to try to get what he wanted. Mullen investigation. He sent those to Vanessa Carmelo. He sent an email pertaining to be a lawyer named Sophia Carlucci, according to Vanessa Carmelo. And she knew it was John Mello writing it because she's read so many emails from him, they matched up. So he's trying to gain a strategic advantage. John Mello and Zach Hughes were trying to harm Christina because John Mello had a custody problem. And the only way to solve it was murder. So Zach visits John for 3 weeks in June in Italy. So he met him for 5 times between August and October of 2020. They're having lots of conversations on the WhatsApp, and he's in 3 weeks in June in Italy. And it was a pretty important moment when Zach Hughes said, John Mello offered me $5,000 to kill Christina Parcel. John Mello offered me $10,000 to kill Christina Parcel. Now, of course, Zach said he wouldn't take that money. He would just do it for free. Because killing Christina Parcel is the right thing to do. So I submit that's when the plot to murder Christina Parcel began. That's kind of when this evolved. And I think they started with the photos, which were in June and July, but that wasn't going to carry any weight with anything. Interesting that a struggling pianist turned down $10,000 to do it for free. Especially of a person he's never met on behalf of a little girl he barely knows. Now, much of what Zach Hughes said, I believe, on that stand was true. I think a lot of it was a bunch of self-serving, narcissistic junk. Zach Hughes is trying to portray himself on that stand as a hero instead of the cold-blooded killer that he is. Ladies and gentlemen, we judge the defendant by their actions, not by their excuses or their words. Actions speak much louder than any self-serving lies from a sadistic, pathological killer like Zach Hughes. He murdered Christina Parcel, mother to Aida, sister to Tina Parcel, and daughter to Erica and Tim Parcel. Now, I've talked a lot about Vanessa Cormelo because she's a key witness, because that is the dispute that we're having, the custody battle. And she's in charge of making recommendations about who should get custody. Her job is to investigate the custodians. She stated that she investigated every allegation which were at Christina, which was involved in prostitution and drugs. She stated she would investigate every allegation, hire private investigators, put trackers on cars, meet with potential custodians, have home visits, and talk with the child constantly. So she's doing everything that she can possibly do. She even had allegations like Alex Fields. There's an affidavit that the defense submitted on Alex Fields, where he says that he was propositioned by Christina Parcel for sex and offered to sell him drugs. And he put in an affidavit. This was after John Mello put on Craigslist, "Do you have any information about Christina Parcel that I know about? I'd like to know anything about who responds to a Craigslist body." And then sets an example of what they did at a bar. And for what purpose? Maybe it's true. Maybe it's not true. I have no idea. That's what Alex Fields says. Really doesn't matter. While the defense wants to impugn the integrity of Christina Parcel as a justification for committing murder, so be it. If doing bad things means anyone can break into my house and stab me 35 times without retribution, then two things will happen. There'll be a lot of people stabbed to death, and I'll be out of a job, because all we'll have is vigilante justice in our system. But again, these are allegations that John Mello is making. He's looking for any dirt on Christina Parcel. Again, these are all allegations. Well, let's come to a...
What did he say? Just because I must have missed it. I thought I was paying attention, but you know how I am.
It was getting close to get custody. Her investigation revealed that before Christina's murder, she would write a favorable report for Christina Parcel and a bad one. That's what Vanessa Cormelo said. In addition, it was almost 6 months since Aida had come home, and that's important. 6 months. Someone can file to terminate the parental rights of another. We were about to be 6 months. Zach Hughes said October was the time that he felt it was the time to kill her. Just felt it in his heart and his mind. And he tried on the 12th, did it on the 13th. That is important because it was getting close. John Mello's getting a bad report, and things aren't going to go his way, so he's got a problem. Now, if Christina Parcel is no longer around, he's the last man standing. He's going to get custody. So, Zach admittedly decides to murder Christina Parcel. That was his intent. He bought a gun and a knife about a month before. It was weighing on his soul. Custody dispute's not going well. And so he entered into a lot of planning going into this murder, a ton of planning. And the state presented all of this evidence to you before he testified. But we know that Zach Hughes on the 12th was up at the Mountain House because his phone showed that he was up there. And while up there, he had his truck. And we know he put his bike in the back of the truck. And we know he parked it somewhere. And we know that he decided to park somewhere near Cambridge and ride his bike in there. And we didn't know, but we know that he knew the schedule of Christina Parcel that day because he said John Mello told him. So he gets in his truck, and I would submit he arrives around 7:42-ish to somewhere wherever he parked. We never learned exactly where he parked near Cambridge, but we know he parked somewhere there, and he rode his bike. Because at 7:42, we know from his phone that he plugs it in and unlocks it. And that's the last activity on his phone at that time. So he parks, maybe he plans, he thinks, and he gets on his bike and he drives in. And we know he drives in because he passes Donna Gorman's house. And Donna Gorman was an early witness from the state. And she did an identification of Zach Hughes from that witness stand. State was not expecting that. We had never shown her a photo lineup. We'd shown her a photo of the bike, of Zach on the bike from the ring cameras. But she had never seen Zach in person. And so we just left it. Now, we did wait until about 3 years after the murder before Donna Gorman told us that information. That is true. Riley Stokes talked to her that day, and he didn't have a copy of it. Master Deputy Wolf talked to her on the 19th, and he didn't show her a copy of the person on the bike. And so there was so much chaos going on, so many officers moving in so many directions, trying to find the evidence to solve this murder. It was just overlooked. And so when we went and talked to her, this was her testimony. And that's what we presented to this jury. She was right. She was right. The DNA proved it. Zach Hughes proved it. So Donna Gorman sees him, and she says this around 8:15-ish when he goes by. And then he goes to Christina Parcel's house. And my opinion is that he went and he hid under the bottom of the house. His testimony was different. He says different. He says that he got there and went straight in, dropped his bike, and went to the front door. We have a difference. Maybe he's telling the truth. Maybe I'm wrong. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. But I submit that he went and he waited. He had an hour to wait. Of course, he had an hour drive to the Mountain House. Oh, wait. You know what he could have done? He could have turned around. He could have done anything he wanted. He could have gone to the QT. He could have changed his mind. Had many opportunities to do that. He was committed. And so he went and he lied and he waited. And he waited for a time because he knew her schedule and he knew her car. He knew her address. That's in evidence. And he went and he decided to walk in the front door with roses as a ruse, according to his testimony, with a gun and a knife and a backpack, paint thinner so he could clean up afterwards, and he kills her. So let's see the moments before Christina Parcel is murdered. Zach Hughes dressed as he said he was. Gray sweatshirt, backpack, black pants. walks directly into that house. I can't see if he's carrying flowers. I know he was. I know he had flowers on him. And he walks in and he surprises Christina Parcel. Points a gun at her and hits her in the head with the gun. And then he stabs and he begins to stab and he begins to slash and he begins to slash and he begins to stab and slash. Now think of the force needed to stab someone in the chest, stab them in the back, all over the head. And finally, and through all the fighting and the stabbing and the pushing, while Christina is fighting for her life, stabs her in the jugular and the carotid artery, causing her to bleed out. With blunt force trauma to the head, she has to be on the ground. Blood is everywhere, pulling around her dropped phone and the couch. But that's not enough. He drags her through her own blood to cover up the crime as he closes the curtains and locks the front door so he's not detected as droplets of blood fall from his blood-soaked clothes. She remains laying on that floor.
I am at the end of my rope with this thing. Maybe, maybe he didn't know about the drugs. Maybe he didn't plant the drugs. Maybe they were hers and they were there. That's always a possibility too.
You commit it, then you got to clean up. You got to cover up. So he first had to cover up the sin. He had to worry about that DNA under her fingers. Had to wipe her fingers down with that paint thinner. He did not want to get caught. And we good exercise cover up. He went back to the mountain house. Of course, we know he's there because his phone puts him there around 1. And then really good exit strategy, cover up. He went back to the mountain house. Of course, we know he's there because his phone puts him there around 1:17. He connects to the Win Wi-Fi.
Well, I don't see the fireworks that recovery addict said was happening. So now, Judy, are you in RA's chat? You're going to have to tell me when or if the fireworks are going to happen because I don't know what he was talking about. You know how he is about spoilers. He's never going to give a spoiler. He threatened to ban me forever because I wanted to give a hint. He hates spoilers. I hate them too, but so I don't know what he was talking about. And I don't see any fireworks. Not yet, anyway.
The Winds have a mountain house. He has access to it. Remember, it's real remote. I think Master Deputy Wool said it's so remote you could walk around naked. Nobody would see you. Perfect place to clean up a crime scene like that. Can you imagine how soaked in blood his clothes were? Can you imagine how soaked in blood his car was? Can you imagine how soaked in blood his bike was? And he did. And he admitted it. Burned his clothes, ditched the knife and the gun in some pond, cleaned up everything, and he went back to Tyndall about his daily life. And that's what he said. I've mentioned Zach Hughes' testimony a lot. Of hearing the specific testimony of the killing of Christina Parcel by a cold-blooded, cold stone-faced killer, trying to portray himself as a hero instead of the cold-blooded, calculating killer that he actually is. Only a person with a severely diminished sense of heroism, with a heart that is cold as ice, can portray that. The absurdity of many of his words and I'll reference a couple. I wanted to make her death quick and painless. This is what he said. When I was listening to that, it was hard for me to comprehend that someone is actually saying that at their trial to a jury. Do we say thank you? I appreciate it. Thank you for taking my pain into consideration as you murder me? What does that even mean? Well, I'll ask you this. Was it quick and painless when he hit her in the head with a gun? Was it quick and painless when he stabbed her the first time? Was it quick and painless when he stabbed her the second time? How about the 5th, the 10th, maybe the 20th? He was being considerate. Maybe the 30th. How about the final 35th blow?
Hey, Flash.
And then, of course, I asked him one question. How'd you drag her body across the room. And he said, I don't really recall, but I think it was by her ankles. And he looked me in the eyes in a stone cold faced way, told me the answer, like he was proud of it. He said, I do not want anyone else to be involved. I waited till everyone was gone. Thanks. Appreciate that. Talking like he's doing us a favor. I wonder what would happen if a neighbor did come over. I wonder what would happen if Brad Post had showed up. I wonder what would happen if Tina Parcel had showed up. Would it be a double homicide? So we could escape and escape detection? And of course, he was so calculated, he got her schedule that day from John Mello. And then he said, I didn't want to get caught because they would connect me to John Mello. Oh, okay. So if you didn't get caught, you've solved the custody problem. But if I did get caught, then I didn't solve the custody problem because then they would connect me to John Mello and he wouldn't get custody. Then he comes in here, testifies, connects John Mello. Doesn't make any sense. Now, he talked a good bit about his background. My understanding, he's a fantastic pianist, highly trained. But he went through his resume with an ego, letting you all know how great he really was. Military service. Playing these really difficult sonatas by Beethoven. I'm going to play all 16, never been done.
I thought it was 32.
But he described his sister Grace in great detail as well, for some reason. He said she was a horrific person when confronted with irrefutable evidence. She would go cold, stone-faced. She would manipulate and recruit others to do a terrible deed. If you trust Grace, you're only going to get hurt again. She was a vampire and would suck the blood right out of you. Maybe he's described himself. He said, I feel pity for her. He felt pity for Christina Parcel. How is that even possible of a human being? His heart is so mean, so depraved, that he viewed someone he'd never met and discussed the specific details of killing her, treating her like she was an elderly dog being sent to the vet to be euthanized. It doesn't get any meaner than that. Christina Parcel didn't have to die. Zach Hughes had a million opportunities to not do this. And if he did it to save Aida, there's a million ways to handle that. Vigilante justice is not allowed in this state. Vigilante justice isn't allowed anywhere. Regardless of what Zach Hughes had in his mind or what he thinks he had into his heart, he's lying to himself. Because all he had was hate and meanness, coldness. He brutally murdered Christina Parcel. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long 2 weeks. I thank you for your service, and I thank you for listening to me. The evidence is absolutely overwhelming. I'm going to ask you to go back there and deliberate. I'm going to ask you to find Zach Hughes guilty of harassment, of burglary, of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime.
Okay, I don't know what he was talking about.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if the dude, I don't know if he's mixing his metaphors or, I mean, that's not the right term. I don't know. He said he felt pity. He felt pity for Christina Parcel. Well, it wasn't like she was an old dog that he was taken to the vet to be euthanized. He wasn't that mean, or that was mean. I don't know how he said it. That's exactly what pity is when you take your dog to the vet to be euthanized. That's the definition of pity. That's not mean. Like, you're not making sense in your closing statement, dude. Oh my god. Dude, if they find him guilty, it's not going to be because of your lawyering. It's going to be because of his confession on the stand.
May I please report? May I get a little bit more? I want to start with something that Mr. Wilkins said towards the beginning of his comments to you. He said, Zach Hughes solved John Mello's problems. Yesterday, Zach Hughes told you he solved Aida Mello's problem. That's what he told you yesterday. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to watch the state. You got to watch the evidence. Zach Hughes yesterday came in here and told you under oath that he killed Christina Parcel on October the 13th, 2021. He told you that. But contrary to what Mr. Wilkins just told you, killing somebody in and of itself is not a crime. Mr. Wilkins told you that he confessed to committing the crime. That is not the case. Yesterday, Zach Hughes told you that he killed Christina Parcel, but in doing that, he did not tell you or confess to any crime. And let me be clear, and let me tell you why I say that. Every crime, and the judge is going to tell you this in the instructions, every crime has two parts in general terms. The actus reus, which is the action, and the mens rea, which is what's in your mind, the intent that the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's very important that you understand this from the get-go. He did not confess to a crime yesterday. He confessed to killing Christina Parcel, but that in and of itself does not make him guilty of murder. That's very important. Okay? The first part of, or Mr. Wilkins had talked about how this case is unique. It is unique. And one of the unique parts about this case is that first part that I talked about, the actus reus, the action that's involved, there's very little dispute, if any. Zach admitted that he killed Christina Parcel, right? Where the dispute is, where the heart of this case is is the evidence as to what was in Zach's heart, what was in Zach's mind. The state must prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt. It must be evidence that leaves you firmly convinced. It must be evidence that would cause you not to hesitate to act. Right? That's what they have to do. So the heart of this whole case, Mr. Wilkinson can talk about the blood, he can talk about the scene, he can talk about all these things. But the heart of this case is the intent, is the mens rea. What have they proven about Zach's intent? All right, now, let's talk more about what the judge is going to charge on the law and what they have to prove about intent, about the mental side of this. All right, Zach has been charged with murder. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt malice. That is the intent, the knowledge, the mental part of murder. The state must also prove burglary in the first degree, that when he entered that home, he intended to commit a crime. In this case, murder. He intended to commit the crime, which means there was a crime he committed. For harassment, the state must prove that he sent those mailers, which he admitted to doing, he sent those mailers without a legitimate purpose. And for the conspiracy, the state must prove that he formed an agreement to do something illegal. That is the mental component to this. And again, that's the heart of the case. And Mr. Wilkins, in his opening statement, said, we have to prove the state beyond a reasonable doubt an angry heart, that Zach was mad. That's where the heart of this case is. What was Zach thinking? What has the state been able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt about what was in his heart and what was in his mind? Now, you're going to hear, the judge is going to talk to you about different types of evidence you can consider. He's going to talk to you about circumstantial evidence, which is evidence that an arrangement of facts, when put together, that lead to other facts or conclusions. That's circumstantial evidence. I'm going to tell you direct evidence. Direct evidence derives knowledge about what happened. All right, that is direct evidence. The state has the burden of proof on the mental element, and the state is going to use circumstantial evidence. That's what they're going to use. We have no burden of proof whatsoever. We entered and are going to use both direct evidence and circumstantial evidence to explain what Zach's state of mind was on October the 13th, 2021. Now, what is the state going to do to try to prove what was in here, to try to establish the burden of the mental side? Again, it's more than just the acts. That's critically important. But what's the state going to use to prove the mental component to this? They're going to use the acts, and they're going to say, they're going to use the stab wounds, the photos. They're going to use all the actions that Zach testified to yesterday, that in and of itself is not a crime. And Mr. Wilkins, he talks about stab, and I wrote this down, stab, 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 slash, right? Got to watch. Got to be careful, right? This is a tragic case. Bottom line, someone died. The last thing I ever want to do is minimize the tragedy in this case. Not going to do it, all right? But when we come to talk to you about what happened, you have to have faith that what we are saying is balanced. Think about what Zach testified to and what Claire Rose testified to about Christina Parcel and what happened that day, all right? Stab, 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 slash, slash, slash. Claire Rose testified Christina Parcel was 163 pounds. Zach testified that he was 160 pounds. Claire Rose testified that there were, of the 35 wounds, the vast majority were incised wounds, superficial wounds, wounds that would have been consistent with a struggle. Zach told you that when he went inside, there was a struggle. He told you that they fell to the floor. He told you that when he got inside, his body would not do what he was telling it to do because he didn't want to do it. He did not want to have to do it. So let's talk about the circumstantial evidence that the state has offered as evidence to try to get you to understand what was in Zach's mind. The state talks about, in determining how much weight to give to their representations about their conclusions on the circumstantial evidence, just think about this. Donna Gorman testified that 3 years after it happened, having never been shown a photo lineup, with Zach's face all over the television and the internet, that she says that she saw Zach. Now, here's what is most troublesome about this whole thing. She testified that she saw Zach at 8:15. That's what she testified to. She testified she saw Zach through 2 trees in her house, hoodie, no evidence other than her hat. There is no way that she could have seen Zach Hughes at 8:15 because by the state's own evidence, with the ring cameras, with investigator Sparkman, the state's own evidence, Zach didn't even get there until after 9 o'clock. So when he says, Donna Gorman, she saw him, it's impossible to saw him the way she said, because she said 8:15 by their own admission, by their own evidence. Zach didn't even get there until after 9 o'clock. Think about that. In determining how much weight to give to their spin on the circumstantial evidence, think about investigator Sparkman, all right? Called him as a witness and showed him reams of WhatsApp messages. These messages were garbled, but he had a unique skill. I don't know if he went to WhatsApp school, but he's fluent WhatsApp. And he was asked to decode all of these messages for you as though you couldn't have done it yourself. But what's the most interesting thing about what he said in the WhatsApp messages, there was one message that he was not able to decode, coincidentally. The message that had the words Aida and doomed. That was the only message he could not uncode for some reason. Think about that. In trying to determine how much weight to assign to the state's conclusions or their spin on the evidence, think about Vanessa Cormelo and what she testified to. Mr. Wilkins talked about how she was doing everything she could during this period to uncover it. Really interesting, and the judge is going to tell you this. You can determine or decide how much weight to give to testimony. You can give it a lot of weight, you can give it a little weight, you can give it no weight. I want you to think about how much weight to assign to the state's conclusions and that testimony, because I want to take you to one specific exchange between Jake Hofferth and Vanessa Cormelo. Jake Hofferth asked Ms. Cormelo, prior to October the 13th, 2021, and he said this throughout this entire case, prior to the murder of Christina Parcel, you decide and you did alone, prior to the 13th, 2021, did you as to where Aida Mello should live? In other words, would you have had a recommendation as to whether or not she lived with her mother? And what was Vanessa Cormelo's answer to that? And you can hear this for yourself. At the time, I would have recommended the mom. At the time. There was no follow-up to talk about other times. Can you trust that evidence? Very important. That's the circumstantial evidence. Now, let's talk about the direct evidence that he received from Zach himself as to why he did what he did. He got on that stand, he told you. Let's talk about the direct evidence. He talked about what he knew, what he was told by John Mello. That was part of it. He talked about that. But contrary to what Mr. Wilkins said, he had a lot of other information besides just what John Mello told him. He had a deposition that Christina Parcel gave under oath in July of 2016. And you remember I asked him, after you read that deposition, what did you believe about Christina Parcel? What did you believe? He said he believed that she was engaged in prostitution. He said he believed that she had participated in a pornographic movie. He said that he believed that she had used drugs after reading that deposition. Another document that Zach got, Alex Fields' affidavit. Now, this is very important to consider about this. This entire case, the state has worked very hard to distance Christina Parcel from the escort website. And they've made these conclusions just because they want to. Despite the fact that there are website addresses on those photographs, they have insisted that those photographs were private photographs, were taken by John Mello and then somehow put on the internet by John Mello, that she had nothing to do with that, right?
Hi.
Think about this.
Talk to you later.
And this is an evidence for you to consider. The Alex Fields affidavit, it has one page on the front, which is what he said, that they met randomly at Hall's in 2018, that she propositioned him for sex and drugs in exchange for money. He turned that down. But in the second page of the affidavit for Alex Fields, John Mello, in that advertisement, said, if you know this woman, her name is Christina Parcel, and then he puts the Caroline Warren alias in that ad. Right? Here's the question for you to consider. If he didn't think that she really and truly went by Caroline Warren online, why would he put Caroline Warren's name in an ad for people to respond to? Why would he include that if he did not think that may trigger someone who had seen her site? Why would he do that? I would submit to you, he put her name on that ad because she was Caroline Warren, and he was hopeful that someone who had seen the ad or used the ad would recognize the picture and contact him. That's the only reason why that makes sense. Let's talk about the other evidence, and let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's just talk about it that Mr. Wilkins discussed, the planning, right? Let's talk about that. Zach was very honest when he testified about the planning. He told you in detail what he did. In a lot of cases, planning can be good evidence in a lot of cases. As Mr. Wilkins said, this is a very unique case. And probably one of the most unique aspects about this case is that the person who Zach believed posed the danger was the mother to her own child. Think about that. This isn't where you're home and an intruder comes in, you don't know, and it's a spur of the moment. This isn't a random interaction or difficulty. This is what Zach believed. This is a mother, the person who's charged with caring for your child. Most importantly, the person of all on the whole planet who is supposed to be the most nurturing. This is the person who is doing this to the child. The person who lives with the child, The evidence was the person who shared a room with the child, the person who's with the child all the time. So in a situation like that, where you have a belief that's grounded on documents, that's grounded on information shared with you over many, many months, when you have that belief, how do you alleviate that threat, the threat from the mom, without thinking through how to do it? How do you do that? And so I would submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that the planning in this case, unlike most any other case, doesn't show malice because the mom was the threat. The mom was the one who posed the danger. Mr. Wilkins talked a lot about this was just interjecting the custody, just get John custody, get him custody, all right? If this was all about the custody, why would Zach have waited so long to do it?
Because he says he has a good reason for doing it. He did it to save the little girl because she was being abused. But the jury is not allowed to know what they were doing to the little girl. So the fact that he's saying he did it in defense of the little girl kind of isn't helpful to him. But it still doesn't matter because the girl wasn't there at the time. It wasn't an imminent danger. She was at school when it happened. So I understand that he thinks he did the right thing, but he still committed a murder. So that was his defense. But the judge didn't allow it. And he was arrested. He was out on bond, and he was arrested last night because yesterday on the stand he told the jury that the state was hiding things from them, and he was told not to do that, and he did it anyway. So they arrested him. He was out on bond, but now he's in jail for 6 months no matter what.
Right? Part of it, he was in a process. Part of it, he was working on this music project. But the other part is Aida and John were separated for half a year, right? If Zach wanted to fix it to solve John's problem, he would have done it much sooner. But the reason why it took so long is that Zach agonized over it. What do I do? Over time, he continued to get information. What do I do? He didn't want to do it. If he wanted to do it, he would have done it right away. And he told you that when he testified. He told you in detail about that day. He told you about it. About when he woke up, he drove to that location and he thought he was going to throw up. He told you about his hand shaking. He told you about when he got out and got on his bike, it was one pedal in front of the other, just trying to make it there. He told you about this, and you saw him testify. He's, contrary to what Mr. Wilkins said, he doesn't think he's a hero. He's never asked that. He did what he believed he had to do to save an innocent child. That's what he did. That's why it's more than just the action. He hasn't confessed to any crime. He told you what he did. And he told you the truth about what he did. If Mr. Wilkins talked about solving John's problem, right? And he intimated in his closing that an aspiring or starving, I can't remember what he used, pianist would turn down $10,000. Interesting. As though to say he didn't turn it down. There's no evidence anywhere that John Mello ever paid him a dime to do this. None. Gotta watch the state, ladies and gentlemen. lot of in the state's closing, lot of moral indignation. That, what do you mean try to be humane? Who can say that? How does that even mean, right? I was not in Zach's shoes. Nobody was in Zach's shoes but Zach. Nobody was. None of us has been in a circumstance where we have reason to believe an innocent child is being abused by her own mother, where her father is out of the country, the evidence is shown, with a warrant pending, can't come back. When you write an affidavit to try to put the authorities on notice as to what you believe is happening, when you call DSS and DSS does nothing, none of us have been presented with that circumstance. Mr. Wilkins said, we can't condone vigilante justice. That's what he said. He said, if you find him not guilty, I'm going to be out of a job. Right? It's really interesting. The state wants you to be a legislature and make decisions for the people of the state in law and order. But they don't want you to be a jury when it comes to deciding how the law applies to the facts. Because they just want you to assume he's already confessed to it, he's guilty of a crime. They use the word murder throughout, which is a legal phrase, which is an offense that you have to find. So they want you to speak for the people of the whole state, but they don't want you to really look at the evidence. And that's what we're asking for. That's just what we're asking for. Mr. Wilkins said he could have done other things. This didn't have to happen. Okay? The judge will not instruct you that Zach Hughes had a burden to exhaust all remedies, to try everything he could to do. He tried a lot. He wrote the affidavit, went to DSS, did a lot of different things. But there's absolutely no requirement. We have no burden whatsoever. Just to continue to remind you that. We have no burden whatsoever. The burden is on the state. And there's no burden whatsoever for me as Zach Hughes' representative to try to prove to you that he exhausted every remedy. That's just not what the law says, and you don't need to prove. You don't need to even consider that. The evidence is that Zach tried, and when everything failed, that's when he acted to do what he thought was right, and that is, and was, to save Mello. Ladies and gentlemen, the state talked about the mailers, and I don't envy your task. I don't at all. It's a tall task. But I do think the mailers, this piece of the case is a little bit easier for you to resolve, and let me tell you why. The judge is going to tell you that for it to be harassment, a couple things have to happen. First, the person who was the target of the harassment, in this case, Christina Parcel, who's alleged in the indictment, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she actually suffered mental distress, and that a reasonable person would have done so in that circumstance. But there has to be evidence that she actually suffered distress, mental distress. There is almost zero evidence that she actually experienced mental distress in this case, right? Let me talk more about that in specifics. There were at least 3 people who testified for the state who were with her when she gave the letters, those envelopes, to law enforcement. At least 3 people: Brad Post, Dan Bevel, Mike Nicholson. Did any of those people testify she was remotely upset? Any of those people say that she cried? Any of those people say that she was shaking? Any of those people say that she had made statements that led them to believe she was upset? zero evidence that shows or that even comes close to proving that Christina Parcel was upset. And if anything, the evidence you've seen that has been introduced with nude photos of Christina Parcel online, with Alex Fields' affidavit, I think the evidence shows took a lot to get her upset or be in mental distress. So I would submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, on the harassment charge, that's something that you could go to initially and think about that evidence. And based on your recollection of the evidence, if you find that there's no evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she was in mental distress, then that's your answer on that charge right there. It's the state's burden of proof on each and every element. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, the state has brought us here. And they brought the charges that you are to consider. They've decided what to charge, and they have brought us here on these specific charges. And the charges they brought, specifically the charge of murder, is among the most serious charges there is. Doesn't get any more serious than that. Murder, the charge of murder, in contrast to what the state's position is, requires more than the act of killing another person. It requires malice. Malice is defined, and the judge is going to define this for you, as evil, as hatred. In his opening statement, Mr. Wilkins told you an angry heart, mad. Ladies and gentlemen, I would submit to you that the evidence in this case has failed to show you that you should be firmly convinced that Zach Hughes had hatred. You can be shown pictures and talked all about the acts, but when it comes to what he was thinking, what the evidence shows that was in his heart, that evidence hasn't come close. Ladies and gentlemen, in hindsight, 3 years after this happened, it's very fair for you to say this didn't happen, or this didn't have to happen, or disagree. I wouldn't have done it. Some of you may say you would have. Some of you may say you wouldn't. That's fair. Bottom line, can't say otherwise. But no matter what your take on what he did, I think it's so important that we rely on your common sense. And that was one of the things that Mr. Wilkins talked about early on, that how important your common sense is that you bring with you. And so in closing, I'm going to ask that you use your common sense that you brought with you to the courthouse and just ask yourself, does a person who kills another person with the intent to save an innocent child, does that person have evil in their heart? Does that person have an angry heart? Ladies and gentlemen, I would suggest to you that your common sense would tell you no. And that person who killed another to save an innocent child is not a murderer. I would ask that you return a not guilty verdict. Thank you very much.
May please the court.
Now the state has an opportunity to rebut, and I promise you, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be brief, so y'all can get to your deliberations. I do want to address a couple of record. There's zero evidence, not from any evidence. Mr. Mormon said you got to have some emotional distress from the harassment charges. Christina Parcel had a bunch of neighbors receive pictures of her without clothes on, private photos between her and John Mello. And so what did she do? Immediately, Brad Post corralled them all up, took some from neighbors so they didn't go into the police without emotional distress. It's not something that you see very often. Mr. Moore talked about minimize this case. Minimize the killing of Christina Parcel. Minimizing the heinousness of this crime while trying to impugn her character. He talked about malice, and he said that you got to have an angry heart. He kept referring to me. I said, an angry heart, malice. You're mad at somebody. And I'll leave you with this. Ladies and gentlemen, in regards to an angry heart, just because Zachary Hughes' heart is so cold and so dead that it can't be angry, that is not a defense. You prove it by his actions. Thank you.
Members of the jury, it is now my duty as the trial judge to instruct you on the law applicable to this case. And in that regard, it is your duty as jurors to accept and apply the law as I now state it to you. Furthermore, it is your exclusive duty to decide all the issues of fact in this case and determine the effect, the value, the weight, and the truth of the evidence. All the parties have the right to expect that you will carefully consider and evaluate the evidence and apply the law of the case to it so that in the end, all parties will receive a fair and an impartial trial. I remind you that during this trial, you and I have certain duties to perform. As the trial judge, it is my responsibility to preside over the trial of this case, and I also have the duty to rule on the admissibility of the evidence offered during this trial. You are to consider only the competent evidence before you. If there was any testimony ordered stricken from the record during this trial, you must disregard that testimony. And furthermore, you should not even mention or discuss any testimony that I've instructed you to disregard in the deliberation room. You are to consider only the testimony which has been presented from this witness stand, any exhibits which have been made a part of the record in this case, and any stipulations of counsel. I have the additional duty to charge you the law applicable to this case. As the presiding judge, I am the sole judge of the law of this case, and it is your duty as jurors to accept and apply the law as I now state it to you. If you already have any idea as to what the law is or what the law ought to be, and it does not agree with what I now tell you the law is, you must abandon this idea because you are sworn to accept the law and apply the law exactly as I state it to you. In every case tried in this court before a jury, the jury becomes the sole and exclusive judge of the facts in a case. A trial judge cannot intimate, state, comment on, or make any statement to a trial jury about the facts in a case. Since you The jury are the sole judge of the facts in this case. You are not to infer from what I've said during this process or during the progress of this trial in ruling upon the admissibility of evidence or otherwise, or anything that I say now during this course of this instruction to you, that I have any opinion about the facts in this case. The law does not allow me to have an opinion about the facts in this case. This is a matter solely for you, the jury, to determine. And as jurors, it is your duty to determine the effect, the value, the weight, and the truth of the evidence presented during this trial. The defendant is charged with the following: murder, possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, burglary, first degree, conspiracy, and harassment, first degree. I remind you that the fact the defendant was arrested, charged, and indicted in this case is not evidence in this case, and cannot be considered by you as evidence of guilt in this case, nor does it create any presumption or inference of guilt. These documents are simply the formal instruments which contain the charges made against the defendant. It is the formal documents by which this case is brought into this court. The indictments in this case allege several different offenses against the defendant. Each indictment charges a separate and distinct offense, and you must decide each indictment separately on the evidence and the law applicable to it, uninfluenced by your decision as to any other indictment. The defendant may be convicted or acquitted on any or all of the offenses charged. You will be asked to write a separate verdict of guilty or not guilty for each indictment. The defendant has pled not guilty to these indictments, and that plea puts the burden on the state to prove the defendant guilty. A person charged with committing a criminal offense in South Carolina is never required to prove himself innocent. I charge you that it is an important rule of the law that the defendant in a criminal trial, no matter what the seriousness of the charge may be, will always be presumed to be innocent of the crime for which the indictment was issued, unless guilt has been proven by evidence satisfying you of that guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. This presumption of innocence does not end when you begin your deliberations, but it accompanies the defendant throughout the trial until and unless you reach a verdict of guilt based on evidence satisfying you of that guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The presumption of innocence is not mere legal theory, and it is not just a legal phrase. It is a substantial right to which every defendant is entitled unless you, the jury, are satisfied from the evidence of the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The state has the burden of proving the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and some of you may have served as jurors in civil cases where you were told that it is only necessary to prove that a fact is more likely true than not true, such as by the greater weight or preponderance of the evidence. In criminal cases, the state's proof must be more powerful than that. It must be beyond a reasonable doubt. A reasonable doubt is the kind of doubt that would make a reasonable person hesitate to act. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof that leaves you firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. There are very few things in this world that we know with absolute certainty, and in criminal cases, the law does not require proof that overcomes every possible doubt. If, based on your consideration of the evidence, you're firmly convinced that the defendant is guilty of the crime charged, you must find the defendant guilty. If, on the other hand, you think there's a real possibility that the defendant is not guilty, you must give the defendant the benefit of the doubt and find him not guilty. Facts and circumstance that merely place upon the defendant a grave suspicion of the crime charged, or that merely raise speculation or conjecture of the defendant's guilt, are not sufficient to authorize a conviction of the accused. Facts and issue may be proved either by direct evidence or indirect evidence or circumstantial evidence. It is direct evidence if it proves a fact without an inference, and which in itself, if true, conclusively establishes that fact. Direct evidence is basically evidence you can see, observe, or hear with your senses. Circumstantial evidence means the proof of a chain of facts and circumstances indicating the existence of a fact. In other words, you may infer that a particular event occurred based on proof of circumstances warranting such an inference. It is not something that one observes, but from facts, one can draw a conclusion. Crimes may be proven by circumstantial evidence. The law makes no distinction between the weight or value to be given to either direct or circumstantial evidence. However, to the extent the state relies on circumstantial evidence, all of the circumstances must be consistent with each other, and when taken together, point conclusively to the guilt of the accused beyond a reasonable doubt. If these circumstances merely portray the defendant's behavior as suspicious, the proof has failed. The state has the burden of proving the defendant guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The burden rests with the state, regardless of whether the state relies on direct evidence, circumstantial evidence, or some combination of the two. The following things are not evidence, and you must not consider them as evidence in deciding the facts of this case. 1, statements and arguments of the attorneys. 2, questions and objections of the attorney. And 3, testimony that I instruct you to disregard. While argument of counsel is a beneficial part of every trial, you should remember that the statements made by counsel are not evidence. In presenting arguments, counsel often refer to evidence. However, you should base your verdict on the evidence as you remember it. Therefore, if there are any conflicts between the recollection of counsel about the evidence and your own recollection, you should rely upon your own understanding of the evidence. Necessarily, you must determine the credibility of witnesses who have testified in this case. Credibility simply means believability. It becomes your duty as jurors to analyze and to evaluate the evidence and determine which evidence convinces you of its truth. In determining the believability of witnesses who have testified in this case, you may believe one witness over several witnesses or several witnesses over one witness. You may believe a part of the testimony of a witness and reject the remaining part of the testimony of that same witness. You may believe the testimony of a witness in its entirety or reject the testimony of a witness in its entirety. You may consider whether any witness has exhibited to you any interest, any bias, prejudice, or other motive in this case. You may also consider the appearance and manner of a witness while on the witness stand. The rules of evidence ordinarily do not permit witnesses to testify to opinions or conclusions, and an exception to this rule exists for witnesses we call expert witnesses. A witness who by education and experience has become expert in some art, science, profession, or calling may state an opinion as to relevant and material matter in which the witness claims to be an expert, and may also state the reasons for the opinion. You should consider any expert opinion received in evidence in this case, and like any other evidence, give it the weight you think it deserves. If you decide that the opinion of an expert witness is not based on sufficient education and experience, or if you conclude that the reasons given in support of the opinion are not sound, or that the opinion is outweighed by other evidence, you may disregard the opinion entirely. An expert witness's testimony is to be given no greater weight than that of other witnesses simply because the witness is an expert. Further, you are not required to accept an expert's opinion, even though it's not contradicted. There's been evidence presented that witnesses have made prior statements which are not consistent with the witness's present testimony. You may use this evidence to decide whether to believe the witness. You may also use evidence of the earlier contradictory statements to determine the truth of those statements. It is up for you to decide whether to believe the earlier statements or the testimony given at trial. If a witness is shown to have knowingly testified untruthfully concerning any material matter, you may consider this in determining whether to trust the witness's testimony as to other matters. You may reject all testimony of that witness or give all or part of the testimony the weight you think it deserves. In order to establish criminal liability, criminal intent is required. For example, the mental state required to be proven by the state for a particular crime might be purpose, intent, knowledge, recklessness, or criminal negligence. Criminal intent must be proven by the state beyond a reasonable doubt, and criminal intent is always a matter that must be determined by the jury from the circumstances surrounding the situation. There's no way to prove intent to a mathematical certainty. There's no way medical science can dissect a person's brain and determine what the person had in mind. So the law says that criminal intent may be inferred from the circumstances shown to have existed. And this is how you make a determination of whether or not the elements requiring intent was present. It is not necessary to establish intent by direct and positive evidence, but intent may be established by inference in the same way as any other fact, by taking into consideration the acts of the parties and all the facts and circumstances of the case. Criminal intent is a mental state, a conscious wrongdoing. It is up to you to determine what the defendant intended to do based on the circumstances shown to have existed. Criminal intent can arise from action or a failure to act. It may arise from negligence, recklessness, or an indifference to duty or to consequences that is considered by the law to be the equivalent of criminal intent. The defendant is charged with murder. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant killed another person with malice aforethought. Malice is hatred, ill will, or hostility towards another person. It is the intentional doing of a wrongful act and with an intent to inflict an injury or under circumstances that the law will infer an evil intent. Malice aforethought does not require that malice exists for any particular length of time before the act is committed, but malice must exist in the mind of the defendant just before and at the time the act is committed. Therefore, there must be a combination of the previous evil intent and the act. Malice aforethought may be either expressed or inferred, and these terms express and inferred do not mean different kinds of malice, but merely the manner in which malice may be shown to exist. That is either by direct evidence or by inference from the facts and circumstances which are proved. Express malice is shown when a person speaks words which express hatred or ill will for another, or when the person prepared beforehand to do the act which was later accomplished. For example, any acts of preparation going to show that the deed was within the defendant's mind would be express malice. The defendant is charged with possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, and the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant was in possession of a firearm or knife during the commission of a violent crime. A firearm means any machine gun, automatic rifle, revolver, pistol, or any weapon which is designed to or may be readily converted to expel a projectile. In order to find the defendant guilty of possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime, you must first find the defendant guilty of committing a violent crime. Murder is a violent crime. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the weapon furthered, advanced, or helped in the commission of the crime. The defendant is also charged with first-degree burglary. The state must first prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant entered a dwelling without consent. A dwelling is any building or portion of a building in which a person ordinarily sleeps. A building is a dwelling even if the residents are temporarily absent from the building. In order to prove that the defendant entered the dwelling, the state does not have to show that the defendant's entire body entered the dwelling. The smallest entry is sufficient. It may be any part of the body, such as a hand or foot, or even an instrument, such as a hook or other instrument. In addition, the state does not have to prove that force was used to gain entry. If a person enters a building by using deception, artifice, trick, or misrepresentation to get consent to enter, this is an entry without consent. Next, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant intended to commit a crime, either a felony or a misdemeanor, at the time of the entry. The mere entry into a dwelling without consent is not burglary. If the intent to commit a crime is formed after the entry, it is not burglary. On the other hand, if the defendant intended to commit a crime at the time of the entry, it is a burglary, even if the intent was abandoned after the entry. It does not matter that the intended crime was not completed. Intent may be shown by acts and conduct of the defendant and other circumstances from which you may naturally and reasonably infer intent. Finally, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt the existence of one of the following aggravating circumstances, such as 1, when entering while in the dwelling or in immediate flight, the defendant or an accomplice caused physical injury to anyone not participating in the crime, or 2, when entering while in the dwelling or in immediate flight, the defendant or an accomplice used or threatened to use a dangerous object, or 3, when entering while in the dwelling or in immediate flight, the defendant or an accomplice displayed what was or appeared to be a knife, pistol, revolver, rifle, shotgun, machine gun, or other firearm, or 4, when entering while in the dwelling or in the immediate flight, the defendant or an accomplice was armed with a deadly weapon or explosive. A deadly weapon is any article, instrument, or substance which is likely to cause death or great bodily harm. Whether an instrument has been used as a deadly weapon depends on the facts and the circumstances of each case. The following are examples of instruments which may be deadly weapons: a pistol, a shotgun, a rifle, a dirk, a dagger, a knife, a slingshot, metal knuckles, a razor, gasoline, a firebomb, Molotov cocktail, and lighter fluid. A gun may be a deadly weapon, even if it is not operating. The defendant is charged with conspiracy. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant combined with one or more persons for the purpose of committing an unlawful act or of committing a lawful act by unlawful means. There must be a mutual understanding, agreement, or common intention and plan. Mere passive knowledge of or consent to the criminal conduct of another is not enough to make a person a conspirator. There must be guilty knowledge and participation. Similarly, the mere fact that the defendant may have associated with another person or met with another person and discussed common aims and interests does not necessarily establish proof of the existence of a conspiracy or that the defendant was involved in a conspiracy. On the other hand, it is not necessary that the agreement be a formal one, that it be in writing, that the person hold a meeting and expressly state in the terms of the common plan, or that the agreement be stated in words between them. The agreement of a criminal conspiracy may come into being through an implied mutual understanding. The willful, intentional, and knowing adoption by two or more persons of a common plan is sufficient. No overt acts need to be shown to establish a conspiracy. A conspiracy may be shown by circumstantial evidence and the conduct of the parties. In order to convict the defendant of conspiracy, the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt not only that the defendant knew of the unlawful conduct, but that the defendant agreed to combine with the other person for the purpose of accomplishing the unlawful conduct. The defendant is charged with harassment first degree. The state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant engaged in a pattern of intentional, substantial, and unreasonable intrusion into the private life of a targeted person that served no legitimate purpose and caused the targeted person and would cause a reasonable person in the targeted person's position to suffer mental distress. Intentional means willful, intending the result which actually occurs, not accidentally or involuntary. Intent may be shown by acts and conduct of the defendant and other circumstances from which you may naturally and reasonably infer intent. The state may prove harassment first degree by showing that the defendant engaged in a pattern of 1, following the targeted person as the targeted person moved from location to location; 2, initiating, maintaining, or repeating visual, physical, or verbal contact after the defendant was notified that the contact was unwanted; 3, surveilling or the maintaining a presence near the targeted person's residence, place of work, school, or another place regularly occupied by the targeted person. Or 4, committing vandalism and property damage. These are only examples of harassment first degree. You may find that other conduct of the defendant which caused the targeted person mental distress would be harassment first degree. A pattern means 2 or more acts occurring over a period of time, however short, evidencing a continuity of purpose. If you find the defendant not guilty of harassment first degree, you may consider whether the defendant is guilty of harassment second degree. A defendant is guilty of harassment in the second degree if the state proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant engaged in a pattern of intentional, substantial, and unreasonable intrusion into the private life of the targeted person that served no legitimate purpose and caused the targeted person and would cause a reasonable person in the targeted person's position to suffer mental distress. Intentional means willful, intending the result which actually occurs, not accidentally or involuntarily. Intent may be shown by acts and conduct of the defendant and other circumstances from which you may. The state may prove harassment second degree by showing that the defendant engaged in a pattern of verbal, written, or electronic contact that is initiated, maintained, or repeated. These are only examples of harassment second degree. You may find that other conduct of the defendant which caused the targeted person mental distress would be harassment second degree. A pattern means 2 or more acts occurring over a period of time, however short, evidencing a continuity of purpose. Electronic contact means any transfer of signs, writings, images, sounds, data, intelligence, or information of any nature transmitted in whole or in part by any device, system, or mechanism, including, but not limited to, a wire, radio, computer, electromagnetic, photoelectric, or photo-optical system. Consider any possible penalty for any particular crime. The punishment for the crimes is a matter for me to determine and should never be considered by you in any way whatsoever in arriving at an impartial verdict as to the guilt or innocence of the defendant. Madam Foreperson and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I wish to express the hope that each of you will be mindful of the importance of your responsibility. You're not called upon to serve as jurors very often, and the proper performance of duty, each of you to reach the height of freeing your mind of all improper influences. As the presiding officer of this court, I am vitally concerned that whatever verdict you find will be the result of your going into the jury room and confining your consideration to the evidence and the law that you have heard in this courtroom, weighing it fairly and impartially, as I have every confidence you will do. Your verdict in this case cannot be based on sympathy, compassion, prejudice, or emotion, or some other consideration not found in the evidence. Remember, your verdict must be unanimous. I will now explain the verdict form and possible verdicts. There are 2 pages to the verdict form, and this will go back with you to your jury room. Once you have received that, you will be instructed at that point to begin deliberation. There are 2 possible verdicts for each charge, which you may find in this case, and there's no significance whatsoever in the order in which I state these possible verdicts. It is simply that one must be stated first. Ladies and gentlemen, your verdict must be a unanimous one. Madam Foreperson, when the jury agrees on the verdict, you will write the verdict on this verdict form and then sign your name as Foreperson. Then knock on the jury room door and inform the bailiff that you have reached a verdict. At that time, we will receive you back into the courtroom. Madam Foreperson, if the jury has any questions, please write the questions on a piece of paper, not the verdict form, and give to the bailiff. Everyone needs to be present when deliberating. If one of you takes a restroom break, then the rest of you should pause deliberations until said person returns. I ask that you now return to your jury room, but do not begin deliberations until you are told by the clerk or the bailiff to do so. There are matters that I must discuss with the attorneys before you begin your deliberations, and if my 4 alternates will remain in the courtroom.
"12 hours later." Oh my gosh. $4 o'clock. I don't think they're going to come back today. So, the difference between this, in my opinion, between this and Colin Griffith, and I know a lot of people disagree with me about Colin Griffith, but in his case, it was not planned. It wasn't planned, and we have no idea what happened because there were no cameras. He didn't get on the stand and say what happened. We saw him, well, the witnesses saw him and his mother outside, and we heard all we know is that what he told 911 happened, that she fell on the knife. We don't know if she had the knife and was threatening him with the knife. He might have gotten the knife and just stabbed her because he was mad at her. But we don't know that. We have no way of knowing that. And she was horrible to him. In the past, she had pulled a gun on him and then gave the gun to him and told, or pew pew, whatever, told him to pew pew her. So maybe that's exactly what she did with the knife. Took it out and gave it to him and told him to do it. Yeah, he did, but we don't know what happened in the case with his dad. That could have been real true self-defense. They investigated it and he didn't go to trial in that one. We don't know. And that kid asked for help. Every time he turned around, what teenager is going to say, I want to go to foster care? I want to be Baker acted. That kid asked for help. And nobody helped him. He asked his parole officer for help. He asked DCF for help. He asked the cops for help. I'm not saying she fell on the knife. I'm just saying we don't know. We don't know what happened. We don't know. She might have started beating the crap out of him when they got inside the house after he pulled her hair. And then he picked up the knife. He might have been just fed up. And I got a fraction of what he got from my mother. Coercive control is not a fun thing to live under. And I only got a fraction of what he got. So I don't know if I'd been in the jury room and talking with the other people, I might have felt differently and voted differently, but just on my own watching it, not discussing other than with you guys the evidence, that's the way I would have voted. But had I been there and talking it over with the other jury members, I might have felt differently. But that's the way I felt. But with this one, I feel the opposite. I think deep down that Zachary Hughes is a good man. I think that he felt like he was doing the right thing. I think he was doing this to save the little girl. I still think it was wrong. especially since he had no relation to that little girl other than it was his friend's daughter. And I feel like John Mello took advantage of him. I think he somehow, I don't know how, but knew that he was going to be able to manipulate this guy into helping him do this somehow. And that he took advantage of the friendship with the guy to get his help. I don't know how he knew, or maybe he just became friends with him and then thought, this guy wants to be a do gooder and will help me do this. I think he was taken advantage of. I really, really do. Yeah, his grandma did try to help him. And hopefully he can be with his grandma. I mean, he's grown now, just about, right? 17, 18. How old is he? He'll be out on his own soon. And now, in a few years, if we hear that he's killed his wife, then I'll be singing a different tune. Right. Right, I didn't kill my mom, but there's also, see, now in his case, his parents were divorced, and apparently he had two parents that he had problems with. In my case, my parents were married, and I only had one parent I had a problem with. So I had a very good parent and a not so great parent. And in my case, my mom, she loved me. She was just parenting me the way that her parents had parented her. So it wasn't purposeful abuse and it wasn't mental illness. It was parenting by example of her parents. So I knew I was loved. So it was weird. It was mind trippy. And I'm still undoing that to this day. And I wanted kids so bad, but I am so glad that I didn't have any because I know I would have done something that my mom did, and screwed them up too. And so I'm glad I didn't do that. Yeah, see, I, before school got the way it is now, just what I've heard, because like I said, I don't have kids. Um, but I was always against homeschooling because to me, part of homeschooling is, I mean, part of school is the socialization, especially in high school. You've got football games, cheerleading, band, homecoming dances, prom. That's part of education, is learning to socialize. And, prom is a formal dance. Everybody's dressed in formal clothes. That's competition in football. Like, they had just started when my goddaughter was like 3. They had just started doing the participation thing where neither side wins or loses. It's, everybody participated. I was like, that's ridiculous. That's part of learning how the world works. Sometimes you lose. I don't know. I have no idea. But the way that school is now, like my kids, my stepkids are, Katie just turned 32, Kristen is 30, and they still don't have any kids of their own. And I told Travis, I said, if they have kids and they want them homeschooled, I will homeschool them. Just because it seems like they're getting taught things that aren't educational and they're not taught things they should be being taught. Like, we were talking about that on Recovery Addict the other day. Um, Homeschool cluster, like homeschool kids getting together to do socializing type things. That's cool. Yeah, see now that I could get behind that. That would be really good. Yeah. Um, because on Recovery Addict channel we were talking about like civics classes. They don't teach civics anymore. I remember in high school we had civics and I loved it because it teaches you the basics of law, the judicial branch, the executive branch, how bills become laws and all that. And they don't teach that anymore. They teach what you need to know to pass the stupid standardized tests. They don't teach individual subjects. I mean, they say it is, but it's not. They just teach what they need to know to pass that that stupid standardized tests. I used to love class trips. I loved field trips, and I genuinely loved them. Not goofing off, like to learn museums and stuff. I loved. We went. It had to be in elementary school because it's when I lived in Sarasota, because it was on the Ringling Brothers property of the mansion. Um, they don't teach Black history in schools. Well, yeah, I didn't learn Black history in schools. I learned Civil War stuff, but not specifically Black history stuff. Um, but we went on a field trip to a medieval fair. And I remember because it was at the Ringling Mansion. It was on the grounds of the Ringling Mansion because it's so big. And it was so much fun. And I had to be in elementary school because that was when we lived close to it. And then they had it up here, and the guys from Medieval Times in Kissimmee, they actually come up and joust at the one here. And I always miss it because we're like 45 minutes from Gainesville and we don't have TV. We just have internet and streaming services. So I never catch the advertisements of when they're going to come up here. And so I always end up missing the fair. And I keep telling Travis, we need to start finding out when it is so we can go. Because I think, I don't remember if it's once or twice. And I was like, you're going to hate it, but we're going. um, we went the second time I went into remission. Actually, I'm wearing that shirt. I didn't even do this on purpose because I didn't know we were going to talk about this. I went, I hate how dark I am in the afternoon because the sun comes in through my broken blinds and it makes it dark. I've still got my ring light right there and the right on, and I'm still super dark. But I went and changed my shirt because my monkey shirt is really thin, and I was kept pulling it down because it's still a little small on me, and I was afraid it was gonna rip, and it's a like collector's item. So I changed. This is the Medieval Times shirt that Travis bought me when we were there because I surprised him. I bought tickets. I didn't tell him where we were going. And then, oh, Christian, you know what I meant. Um, so I finally told him like right before we left. And I know you were joking, but if there's people in here that don't know me, I don't want people to get the wrong impression. Although everybody in here probably knows me. Um, so I told him like I had to end up telling him right before we left because I think he thought we were going to a water park because I was like gonna surprise him, and he loves water parks. So finally had to tell him before we left. And I said, "This is celebrating my remission from cancer. So no, we're not going to water park. We're going to someplace I want to go." And he didn't really want to. When I told him, he acted like he didn't really want to go, but he wasn't giving me a hard time about it. And then Kristen shows up at the last minute. See, this was one of the things. What? I am talking. What do you want, young lady? What? So Kristen shows up at the last minute, which is one of the things that I would set boundaries of, and invites herself along. So the three of us, we went down there, and I'm just thinking, this is going to be miserable. And I was like, honey, please do this for me. Please, let's have a good time. He loved it. He never came out and admitted that he loved it, though. But when you go in, ooh, let me show you the picture. You have to go potty. Is that why you're barking at me? Can you go out the front door and go potty? Yeah, go out the front door. Oh no, you're stuck. Oh, there. You don't. Oh, okay. Well, oh. So they take your picture when you first go in. Well, let me move this thing. Come on, go back to full screen. So they take your picture when you first go in. I'm the short one in the family, so I had to bend over weird. But see, you're like, it's a sword and a stone thingy. Oh, there we go. So he bought the picture, and then he bought us t-shirts, and every single thing I wanted, he did, which is not my husband. He fights me on everything. If it costs money, he fights me on it. And he was just having a blast the whole entire night. So that was lots of fun. So I want him to go with me to the medieval fair because I just remember that. Like I said, I have been to the one up here a couple of times, but I just remember that when I was a kid as being like the my favorite field trip ever. And so, but my cousin homeschools her son, and they go on field trips to like Kennedy Space Center and um, Epcot and museums and stuff like that. So, but there's, I mean, that still you don't have the socialization. You have you have still have field trips, but um, I mean, I've heard of. You went on a field trip to Burger King, or you went to Burger King while you were on a field trip. Nobody goes on a field trip to Burger King. So I left the door open so she would go out. I don't know where she went. She's outside barking. I should have named her Karen. I swear. She's a Karen. Except for fried chicken, right? You're still going to eat fried chicken. Why'd you go on a field trip to Burger King? Did you get to like see how the food was made or something? He has arms now. He has toes. I have to put his toes on and then make his little coat thingy. He's almost done. I need to make a bunch of them and sell them because they're really easy. Like what? This took less than 2 days. Well, I guess I should go. You're working with a personal trainer? Cool. I wish I could do that. Well, it wouldn't do any good because I'm in pain so much I can't really exercise right now anyway. I wish we had enough people to play. Well, okay, there's 4 of us watching, and just because he's at work, so he can't play. So that leaves 3 of us. I mean, I guess 3 people could play. It wouldn't be as fun. It needs to be a bunch of people. I wonder if I did a stream this weekend, like 500 subscribers celebration stream, if we could play then. If like people would show up just to play. Like if I put like Jackbox game 500 subscriber celebration or something like that. Why? You don't need to lose weight. Hang on, let me go let her back in. Are you coming in or are you gonna just park with the neighbors all day? I guess we could do a dry run on the game. Yes. Oh, yuck. No, you need protein. Oh, I love celery, but I peanut butter smeared all over it. Well, that didn't work. That didn't work. Because it covered up StreamYard, so I couldn't see what I was doing. I don't think I've ever dipped celery in chocolate. I've dipped it in peanut butter. I just want to figure out if I can do this because I'm not sure how it works. I know it can be streamed and it can be played with other people because I've done it before. I've just never been the host. And I like um, chocolate covered bacon. Chocolate on. Oh, cool. I think it's going to work. Cool. It works. Neat. But we don't have enough to play. I mean, technically, we have enough to play, but now I don't know. Now I don't know how to start the game. It says waiting for Debbie to start the game, and I don't know how to do that. Oh. I wonder if I can play. I can play by myself? That doesn't make any sense. Yikes, that's loud.
This is your wake-up call. Prepare to die. Welcome to Trivia Murder Party.
Oh, the
I
audience can
compose
play
myself
too.
to strand you here in a fight for your life. And then we'll discover who the true killer is. Just kidding, it's me. It's definitely me. Okay, first question. So I'm filling out my dating profile, but I don't want.
Okay. Yay, it works. Okay. The audience can play. All you have to do is go to jackbox.tv and you can put the code in, and then you can either put the code in and your name to play the game, or you can wait until after I hit start and then you can just play in the audience, which means you can still play, you just aren't in the main part of the game. So I'm going to go get my iPad. While you guys are deciding if you want to play or not, I'm going to go get my iPad. I don't know how you only play with one person though. Ew, what is on my iPad? Why? You just type that in a web browser. And it can load. It worked on mine. It's just jackbox.tv. Don't put a .com or anything. It's just jackbox.tv. And then you put in that code NQLN. Yay!
Local residents familiar with the abandoned building's history know it simply as the Murder Hotel. This hotel was run by a mysterious family for several generations. In other related news, the trivia murder party killer is still on the loose. Up next.
This is your wake-up call. Prepare to die. Welcome to Trivia Murder Party. There is no social mixer in our hotel ballroom. You've been lured into a murderous game of trivia. Only one of you will survive. Anyway, we know you have many choices for your murder hotel needs, and we're grateful you chose us. Alright, first question. If I'm experiencing excruciating thyroid pain, where am I hurting? Use your device to answer the question. And the correct answer is... Who got the question right? Which leaves only you. Follow me. Doom service, workroom 113. It's time for some pegging. Okay, now that I said that out loud, it does sound weird. You're going to drop down this board and try to avoid the death zones. You know what? We need some death zones. Hey, you, pick the landing spots that kill.
See, this is going to be easier because there's only one person picking a spot. When you got a bunch of people and they all pick a spot?
Okay. Let the games begin. Pick a spot. I made this board in shop class. That's not an acceptable way to avoid the death zones. Well, that was thrilling.
What did that mean?
100% honest. I'm a little disappointed. Okay.
Isn't fair. You didn't die, but it killed you anyway. Well, this is going to be a quick game.
Don't worry. Everyone who dies in this hotel turns into a ghost. Keep playing, and you just might steal someone else's life force and win the game. Let's keep moving.
Oh, what are you doing, StreamYard? Dang it, StreamYard. What are you doing?
This.
It is?
Everyone is wrong.
No. I can't believe I got. I missed a Harry Potter question.
I'm giving you the laziest gift of all.
Darn
A
it.
scratch ticket. Scratch and find $3 to live. And if you keep scratching, I'll give you cash for all the extra $signs you find. But if you scratch off even one skull, you die. Get to scratching. Why stop now? We know what a losing ticket means.
Oh. Well, now we're both dead. What happens when both of us die? It's the last person alive that goes to the bonus round? I've never played with only 2 people before.
You died too early. Bummer.
Oh, he's going to bring one of us back to life.
You were having a horrible dream where you died before getting to the final round. That won't happen again.
Okay.
It's time for the next question.
Why is there a next question?
Where was the first subway system?
For crying out loud. I don't know. I'm going to guess. I have no idea.
Who picked this?
I guessed.
Only a ghost got it wrong. Too easy. Let's try another one. Traditionally, which of these drinks contain alcohol?
I have no idea. I don't drink. I only knew the first one because I'm a nurse.
Who picked this?
Nope.
Everyone is wrong. Come with me. The lost art of letter writing.
I hate this one.
I'm going to dictate a message to you. Write down as much of what I say as you can. They will be typing too. And if they type better than you die. Okay, starting letter now. Dear old man seaweed.
Where's
thank
my?
you
I
for
don't
lunch
have.
this afternoon. My favorite part? the crackers and cheese. Whatever was the name of that splendid cheese? I hope you didn't find my questions intrusive. I have one more. Have you ever been in love? Time's up. And here's how you did.
That was horrible.
But did anyone do better than you? Well, I don't like you, but I respect your work.
I think I typed the same sentence twice.
Let's keep moving. Where are the dimples of Venus?
I was gonna say on the planet Venus, but that's not one of the choices.
This.
I did, but I didn't know. I guessed. Not everybody has those.
Let's try another one. What is the rooster's dance to gain favor with the females called?
I didn't know it was called anything. It's not dabbing.
Who picked this?
Oh, nope.
Everyone is wrong. It's time.
Oh, now we get to go to the bonus round. Nope, not bonus round.
Let's see who has ESP. Type in an answer that fits this category. Everyone else will answer too. And if anyone matches you, you die. Write your answers now. Now, let's see if there are any matches. Idiots, I would have guessed that one. We're here. The final round is close. Next question. What's the deepest river in the world? Who picked this? Well, that sucks. Let's keep moving. If your plane gets lost in the Bermuda Triangle, where will you crash? Who picked this? Way too easy.
I was gonna say if I missed that one, that's bad
Let's try another one.
because I live too close to it.
The thing that makes me more nervous than the police is organizing a party. If I throw a rocket bachelor party for my dear friend in London, what's it called?
I know what a bachelorette party is called.
Who picked this? Oh, crap.
A hen party is a bachelor party. I mean, a bachelorette party.
Oh, crap. It's checkout time and too many of you are still alive. Let's fix that.
Only one of me is still alive. No, it's not. This game makes everybody look stupid.
But will you be the one to escape? I'm going to give you a category. German composers. Tap each answer that fits the category and then press submit. Let's see the right answers. You move forward one space for each correct answer. You're a little bit closer to escaping. But wait, there's more. If a ghost catches you, you'll still have a life force. Then they can try to escape and win the game. Here's everyone's next question. And ghosts get a third choice to help them catch up to you.
And it could be none of them, or it could be all of them.
You're better than I thought. Songs from Greece 2. Kind of running away with
Oh,
it.
Grease 2. Dang it.
Characters snapped away in Avengers Infinity War. Kind of a gimme. Don't fall behind. Are you afraid of the dark? Plural nouns. Time is up. Beatles songs. Time is almost up. The end is near, but in a good way. Monsters mentioned in the song, The Monster Mash.
Oh, darn it.
Metric system units of measurement.
Oh, no. Shoot. Height is American. Or whatever ours is called. I don't know.
So close. One last trap. If you want to break through that barrier, you'll need a perfect answer to this question.
Oh, no.
Third answer choice now, too. You have to get all the right answers to escape.
Now we're going to be sitting here all day. Because I'm never going to get all.
Darkness approaches.
Oh,
Hogwarts teachers.
never mind. Another Harry Potter question. But I missed the first Harry Potter question. Thank you, dear, for doing the dry run with me. Now I know how to do it. So now I'm gonna put this back over here. So I'm looking at you and not looking at the other screen. Well, it asks weird questions, is the thing. The first one I got right because it was a medical question, and then I guess at the others. Like I can't believe the dragon question I missed. I thought it was a real animal they were asking about. Um, but that's what I do, I guess. I'm just I'm a lot older than you too. I I'm a good guesser, that's all. I know how to correlate the the way what the question says to the list of answers they give, I guess. I don't know how to explain it. I used to play Trivial Pursuit a lot. A lot, a lot, a lot. There is food trivia sometimes. There's a whole bunch of different versions of it. That's the reason why I picked that one is because there are other Jackbox games that have more games on them and they're more expensive. And so for a start, because I didn't know how it was going to work, I know I'd seen other people do it, but I wasn't sure. So this one was one of the cheaper ones. It was only $20 and it had 3 games on it, and 2 of the games I had played before. So, and I knew that both of them were really fun. So I thought, well, let me just give it a try and see. And no, I can't think of any right off the top of my head right now. But I mean, they ask. There's like no no category that I've seen so far that's not haven't asked a question about, and there's always multiple choice. Always, so you can always just guess whatever, even if you have no clue. You can just pick a guess. And um, what is going on my other screen over here? Um, and it's got like that's Trivia Murder Party 2, and they've got, I don't know, it goes way up. So, like, after we play that one to death and we're getting duplicate questions, then I can buy another one. So it's not like we're going to get bored. We can get another one later. But so I'm trying to decide what, if I get monetized, I'm assuming I will be, hopefully. Um, and I can have memberships. I want to do something fun for members only. And I was thinking about that, or if I can find one that I can afford. I mean, I guess if I have members, then I should be able to afford it. Um, I used to get, and I made one video and then I quit doing it. But the one video I made, people liked, and this was years and years ago. This was before I had this YouTube channel. I used to sell Jamberry, which is it was like a thing. It was nail art, a nail art thing, and I used to make videos of me. Like when I would get the new products, I'd unbox them and I'd put them on my nails and show. So, also, because I had that channel, I was also getting, I can't remember the name of the service. It was a box service. You got one a month, and it was every month it was a different country you would get snacks. So I would do a video of me. I only did one. I did a video of me unboxing it, and some of them were nasty. And so it was really funny. And people, um, like my friends from some of the groups on Facebook that I was in at the time, because I wasn't like a presence on YouTube like I am now. I see you guys in all different chats. I wasn't doing that back then. I was mostly on Facebook. So it's people that I knew from Facebook were watching my channel on YouTube. And they loved it. They thought I was hilarious. And then I quit doing it. I don't know why I quit doing it. And then I quit getting the boxes. That was probably, yeah, that was before my second chemo. That was before my second bout with cancer. Um, that's why I quit getting the boxes, because I couldn't afford them anymore because I had to pay for chemo. Um, but I'm thinking about getting. If there are several different ones now, I don't remember the name of the one that I got, but it came with like this sheet with like a quiz about the country and like a map that showed you, um, like, I don't want to use the word touristy, but like landmarks, special landmarks in the country. And then it had a page in the book that had like special celebrations and traditions, and it was really educational. My cousin's son was a young teenager at the time, and I wanted to get him a subscription because he's the one that, when we were talking about homeschooling earlier, he was homeschooled, and I thought that would be a really cool educational thing for him to have. And then I couldn't even afford it for myself anymore, so I couldn't get it for him. But I'd like to do something like that and make it like a members only. And then if I had people, like Lena, she's from the Netherlands, somebody like that, that maybe could come into the chat too and talk about some of their traditions and stuff. I was like, that would be really cool. Um, I really wanted her to come to my Christmas hangout that I did, because I wanted to hear about Christmas traditions from another place, but I guess she couldn't make it. So, but when I watched The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, well, and even when I read the book, the evil witch or ice queen or whatever her name was, it's been a long time. Um, she gave him Turkish delight, and I remember wondering what in the heck Turkish delight was. And that was back before Google. So I never knew what Turkish delight was. And it kind of just like left my head, and I never thought about it again. So in one of the boxes, and I don't even know what country it was from. I mean, obviously you would think Turkey since it's called Turkish delight. But anyway, I got Turkish delight in one of the boxes, and that stuff is delicious. Oh my gosh. I know. I heard about that too. I was like, that is crazy. That's crazy insane. But I love it. I could get behind that tradition. I really could. But so now I'm in love with Turkish delight. I don't even know what it is, but it's good. It's so good. Really? I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I don't even know what it is. I couldn't even begin to tell you what it is, just that it's delicious. It's some kind of sweet jelly stuff, like dipped in powdered sugar or something, some powdery sweet stuff that tastes like powdered sugar. It's really good. I don't even know what it is. I don't want to know. It's probably like made of horse hooves or something, and I don't want to know. It's so good. But I just remember as a kid reading the book, and then as a young adult watching the movie thinking, what the heck is Turkish delight? I've never heard of it before. And never knowing until, oh wow, it's in this box. And eating it and thinking, why have I never eaten this before? It's amazing. So yeah, I don't remember what it was that I ate that was so nasty, but people loved that video. They were like, "We love your reactions. That was so funny." Ugh. It was some kind of something made out of meat that shouldn't have been made out of meat. I don't, I don't remember what it was, but it was so bad. So that's what I want to do. I want to do stuff like that. I want to do fun stuff for the members only videos because um, we do this all the time. So we should do something fun for the members only videos. A certain term. Oh, an old term for single ladies of a certain age. What, like an old maid? I went to Venezuela in the 90s and had real tres leche cake. And it was so good. I've never had it in the States, so I'm not knocking stateside tres leche cake. I just know that the real thing is very, very good. So I've not had key lime pie. I take that back. I have. That's why I don't eat it anymore. I was gonna say tres leche, not Tracy. Tres leche. Tres leche means three milk. I don't know why they call it three milk. It's a cake that is very, very, very moist because it's got so much milk in it. It's extremely moist. Maybe it has 3 cups of milk in it. I don't know. I mean, it's like wet moist. It's almost as if, I don't know, maybe it is. As if the milk was poured over the cake. And maybe they do. Maybe after they cook it, they pour the milk over it. I don't know. So it's a South American thing, and I had it in South America. Oh, 3 different kinds of milk. Okay, that makes sense. It's so good. It is so good. So, so, so good. When we went to Venezuela, the people that set up our trip, they fed us in the finest restaurants in Venezuela, which isn't saying much, but the food was so good. So, so good. Um, the finest in Venezuela is not like the finest here, but it was nice. And the food was delicious. It was it was such a good trip. And key lime pie, we used to growing up we had a key lime tree and I only ever had fresh key lime pie growing up. And after after that I never had fresh key lime. We only had frozen. And that's probably why I don't eat key lime pie anymore because it's not as good as fresh. And I asked, where was I? Somewhere the other day. It might have been Perkins. And I asked them if it was fresh key limes or frozen. And the lady at the counter was like, I don't know because I don't bake the pies. I just sell them. Okay. I was going to ask you, what is it stuffed with? Like cream cheese? That sounds good. I make French toast the way my mom made French toast. I take, instead of just dipping the bread in egg and frying it, I take egg and cinnamon and brown sugar and I mix it up really good and I put butter in the frying pan and melt the butter and then I dip the bread in that. And then what my mom would do if like she would mix up the whole bowl with the eggs and the brown sugar and the cinnamon and then dip the bread and then if there was left over she'd put it in the fridge and we'd have more the next day. Well, my stepdaughters don't like that. They just want it dipped in egg. And I'm like, what? And then we cut them because I do it like my mom did it. Cut them diagonally. Like I don't put butter on them. I put butter in the pan when I cook them. And then I cut them diagonally and I lay them out all pretty on the plate and then I sprinkle powdered sugar on the top of them. No, my stepkids don't want them that way. They just want them dipped in egg and tossed on a plate. My efforts to make nice, pretty, sweet, palatable French toast. No. They were like, what is this? French toast. What do you think it is? Nope. Okay. Well, I don't think they're going to come back today. What time is it? Yeah, it's after 5. Oh, and I lost the window anyway. Okay. Well, I'm going to call it a day. What's today? Today's Thursday. So they still have tomorrow. They'll come back tomorrow. Ew! No! That's bugs. Cicadas are bugs. Did you eat chocolate covered bugs in Aruba? What is babka? I gotta go cook because it's 5. And I told Travis I was making chili. Oh, Lord, I hope not. If they do, somebody text me and let me know, though. Oh, cool. Yeah, I've had sourdough French toast at restaurants. I've not made it, but I've had it at restaurants. It's really good. You and your baking shows, dude. I can't watch that. It makes me hungry. And then I want to try to bake, and I'm not a good baker at all. Not at all. Okay, guys, well, I'm going to go make chili for my husband, and I'll be back in the morning, maybe. I don't know what we're going to do tomorrow. Just sit and stare at each other again, I guess. Maybe there'll be enough people that we can play a game tomorrow. I don't know. Hey, Carla, no, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just closing arguments. Oh, wait, I hear noise. And that window must still be open somewhere. Hold up. Where is it? Oh, there it is. Hang on, hang on, hang on. I'm glad I didn't go anywhere. Now Travis is gonna come home and say, "Woman, where's my chili?" No, he's not. I'm just kidding. He just walked in the door.
The question, well, it is define malice, and then the question is malice required for murder charge? And the answer is yes.
Travis!
Please listen as I recharge you on murder. The defendant is charged with murder and the state must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant killed another person with malice aforethought. Malice is hatred, ill will, or hostility towards another person. It is the intentional doing of a wrongful act and with an intent to inflict an injury or under circumstances that the law will infer an evil intent. Malice aforethought does not require that malice exists for any particular length of time before the act is committed, but malice must exist in the mind of the defendant just before and at the time the act is committed. Therefore, there must be a combination of the previous evil intent and the act. Malice aforethought may be either expressed or inferred. These terms express and inferred do not mean different kinds of malice, but merely the manner in which malice may be shown to exist. That is, either by direct evidence or by inference from the facts and circumstances which are proved. Express malice is shown when a person speaks words which express hatred or ill will for another, or when the person prepared beforehand to do the act which was later accomplished. For example, any acts of preparation going to show that the deed was within the defendant's mind would be express malice. Thank you. You can return to your jury room.
They're going to let him off.
You can put that back in there.
They are going to let him off. Did you guys hear what the question was? The question was, does there have to be malice for it to be murder? I bet they come back tonight. They asked, does it have to be malice for it to be murder? So they have decided that it wasn't malice. That's why they asked that question. Okay, guys. Well, I'm going to let you go so I can cook dinner. And I'm going to keep it open. And just make sure you've got your notifications turned on. Because if they come back with a verdict, I'll go live. Okay? Does that sound good with everybody? I know it's just a question. That's purely supposition on my part. I'm just saying that's a weird question to ask. Because the defense very much emphasized the fact that there had to be malice for it to be considered murder. So if they don't come back tonight, I will see you in the morning. But like I said, keep your notifications on. And if they come back tonight, I will live stream it and I will see you then. Bye, guys. Have a good evening.